Welcome to The World This Week with me, Gavin Lee, discussing the global events of the past 7 days, distilled into 45 minutes with 4 international correspondents, all explaining in a way that AI chatbots cannot, what it's like on the ground, covering the stories with your own eyes. In a week where 90 days into the conflict and ceasefire in Iran, both Iran and the US are claiming that time is on their side to end it, with both saying the other needs to end the conflict more than they do. There's pressure on the Trump administration with soaring energy prices in the US, midterm elections inching closer, while Iran is losing an estimated $500,000 a day in revenue, with ships stuck in port, reducing their oil production as the floating storage for oil is maxing out. There were reports of an interim agreement to open the Strait of Hormuz within reach. There's a meeting ongoing as we speak. Then the US this week has also struck Iran's southern coast. Self-defense, said the White House, against boats dropping mines and drone launch sites. Iran's regime has threatened retaliation. The US bases in Kuwait targeted hours later. So talks for a temporary deal that could lead to a long-term solution continue.
Iran is very much intent. They want very much to make a deal. So far, they haven't gotten there. We're not satisfied with it, but we will be. We will be either that or we'll have to just finish the job.
It's been a week that's seen the Israeli Prime Minister declare that operations would intensify in Lebanon in the midst of a supposed truce. Benjamin Netanyahu said his forces would crush the Iranian-backed militants Hezbollah and the use of its fibre-optic drones, which is so far the Israeli military has struggled to stop. More than 120 Israeli airstrikes followed. Beirut hit for the first time in 3 weeks, and evacuation orders in the south were expanded north of Lebanon's Litani River. The IDF are now estimated to occupy 5 to 6% of Lebanese territory, the UN describing the scale of destruction as horrific. And Alex Crawford for Sky News was embedded with the Lebanese paramedics in the southern city of Nabatea and sent this footage.
Got to remember, there's hardly anyone living here now. The city has completely emptied out. But there is a pattern of multiple strikes over the past few days. We've seen it just today, with many of the residents, even those that are remaining behind, absolutely terrified. And many of them just staying here because they have no other option.
It's been another week of visits for the statesman of the month. Xi Jinping, as Serbia's President Alexander Vučić, received a friendship medal, joining other honorary custodians such as President Putin and Raul Castro, in a celebration of what they called an ironclad relationship, with China investing another €1 billion in Serbian AI, robots and cars. But while there were parades in Beijing, there were protests in Belgrade with 180,000 people gathering in the main square for anti-government, anti-Vučić demonstration triggered by the collapse of a train station canopy. 18 months ago, 16 people killed. Chinese firms were the lead contractors. Demonstrators arguing it was corruption caused by opaque Chinese deals. Both government reject the accusations.
This is not a political fight. This is not a fight to change the regime. This is a fight for survival.
And it's been a week of sweltering temperatures in Western Europe, a record-breaking May heatwave. The solution for some in Paris being a quick dip in the Seine and the city's famous canal, Saint-Martin too. Once the home of the fictional detective, Inspector Maigret. This week it was real officers playing cat and mouse as they tried to stop young divers cannonballing off footbridges, issuing €35 fines for jumping in unregulated waterways. It made for profitable clicks for Instagrammers, though the most liked comment on social media was when divers were asking in the coming days how long it takes to get a dermatological appointment in Paris. Meanwhile, an Italian court ruled this week that hotels and restaurants do not have to serve you tap water anymore. While in Scotland, Peter Murrell wants the chief executive of the Scottish National Party and estranged husband of the ex-Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon pleaded guilty to embezzling almost €500,000 of party funds, funding a lavish lifestyle he craved but couldn't afford, said the police. From fountain pens, multiple coffee machines, luxury motorhomes, a Jaguar, the car, not the animal. We'll come back to this in just a moment. Let's first introduce tonight's panel. With me in the studio, delighted to be joined by the distinguished seasoned war correspondent Janine De Giovanni. Great to have you with us tonight.
Great to be here.
multiple award-winning author of 9 books, including The Morning They Came For Us, Dispatches from Syria. Let's talk, we talked heavily, Janine, a week ago, almost entirely about Ukraine and the ongoing situation, but I want to start the programme just what's ongoing. Romania, a block of flats targeted by what NATO says categorically as a Russian drone. Russia says it doesn't know its origin, and one of the heaviest strikes across the country this week.
Yeah, my team are in Kyiv, and it was a terrible night, a few days actually of attacks. But there is something which is going on in Ukraine right now, and that is that the tables are being turned, at least morally. And if you look at the old art of war, the concept of a million cuts, this is what the Ukrainians are doing to the Russians. So they have taken some significant territory in the Donetsk and near Zaporizhia. It wouldn't seem a lot by military standards, but it means a lot because when you think about it, there's 2 things. First, no matter what Russia throws at them, Ukraine right now is manufacturing their own drones. They realize after basically the cut with Trump, they had to rely on themselves. So there is much more drone production, anti-aircraft production. The attack in Kyiv, basically 2 people died, which it would have been so much worse if they didn't have an anti-missile protection. The other thing I think that we always have to consider, what other European country would have lasted this long, morally, emotionally, physically, than Ukraine? This has been going on since February 2022. And they have not capitulated. They have not lost the morale. There is a problem with manpower. We know that, right? And we know that their economy is absolutely dire. I mean, babushkas, their pension is now 70, I think it's 70 euros a month, which is nothing. The average salary is about 170. But they will not give up. And this is a real testament to the Ukrainian people. So I think we have to remember this, and we have to look at the significant gains and how they've warded off the attacks. And, you know, the kind of pressure they're putting on Russia, because look what's happening internally inside Russia.
Now, I should also mention that Janine is CEO of the Reckoning Project, which trains journalists how to document war crimes in Ukraine, Middle East and elsewhere.
Yes,
you're
Sudan.
just back from Sudan.
Yeah.
A place that's very, almost impossible, feels like, to report it inside. Gets very little coverage. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I got a visa for Port Said, and then I was refused to go further into Khartoum and Darfur, which is where my team is from and where I needed to work. So instead, I went through South Sudan, went to the border, and captured testimony from the enormous number of refugees who are fleeing from El Fasher, which of course fell in October, Dilling, the Blue Nile, the Kordofan area. It is horrific. I mean, the level of sexual violence, MSF published a report basically, which is shocking. The women that I took testimony from, every single one of them had been raped, including a pregnant woman. And the thing that people never talk about, and this ties into our later talk about Iran, is the UAE's role. Now, they still deny having anything to do with it. But at the heart of this existential and nihilistic war, because no one is really gaining, is the gold. And we never hear about this, but Sudan's gold is the 3rd largest in all of Africa. Where is it going? Straight to Dubai. And they still deny having absolutely no role in it when they basically supplied most of the weapons that encircled El Fasher before the terrible massacre that occurred last October.
Almost nobody. We had a programme not too long ago. We had a Sudanese activist and journalist, Yasmin Abdul-Magid, talking in detail about this. The ability of people, just ordinary Sudanese people, to get on a plane with gold and travel to Dubai.
And the methods they use to get it are archaic. They use mercury to kind of draw it out, which is very dangerous. And it basically, people are risking their lives. People are joining the army so that they will be sent there thinking that they will get something. And then it's all being sold to, being shipped in planes to Dubai.
Janine, it's brilliant always to have you with us. I'm looking forward to your insights tonight. Let's move from the studio. Let's go to London. Let's bring in our next guest, Tara Kangalu, renowned voice on Iran, independent global affairs correspondent, founder of the Art of Hope charity and the author of The Heartbeat of Iran, Real Voices in a Country and Its People. Good evening to you, Tara.
Hi, Gavin. Good to be with you, and of course, Janine.
Well, one thing I wanted to talk to you about, which we will get onto Iran in detail, but from where you are, one story from the UK this week is the spectre of Tony Blair re-emerging, talking about the need, he said this week, for radical centrism. What have you made of that?
Incredible. I mean, of course, for the past 90 days, I've been quite occupied covering the war in Iran and the region. And by the way, quickly on what Janine said on the UAE's role, I think that is vital. And we need to talk about that more and more. And I'm very glad that she brought that on to the forefront of this discussion. But as far as Tony Blair go, I think he took our attention just a few months ago when his name was being first tossed around as to being one of the leaders when it comes to the future of Gaza. Of course, Mr. Blair has an incredibly tainted track record, if you so will, to say the least. Of course, his history in Iraq and so on. And that took everyone by surprise, of course. And then, of course, when the Board of Peace took effect, which, by the way, Gavin, according to an article by the Financial Times that came out earlier this week, the Board of Peace is pretty much bankrupt. So all the countries that have pledged their funds to go into this bigger pool of money very much have not done so. And so that Board of Peace, quite frankly, it's as it stands, it's obsolete. But again, back to Tony Blair, he took our attention there and then. And now, of course, with everything that's going on with Keir Starmer, he is once again trying to bring attention to his own agenda that I should say, quite frankly, again, looking at his track record and his history, we can say it's self-serving.
Very interesting. And for what was going to be the Billionaire Boys Club, for some countries getting involved in this Board of Peace, do we know where the money's gone? What have the FT said about the money pledged so far?
Well, very much so. It hasn't been deposited, let's put it that way. And when you're looking at Gaza, just yesterday, again, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, said that we want to have control of over 70% of Gaza. And Gavin, they already have control over 60%. And this 70% is telling, because that just tells us that we are not going to see a Gaza that will belong to the Palestinian people. This is a new project, this is a new operation, and it very much will be dictated by Israel and, of course, the countries that, quite frankly, either support Israel or, of course, are in the good graces of the United States.
Yes, there was a video yesterday. He was talking to soldiers and he asked what percentage people wanted to see for security. Somebody shouted 100%. He said, no, let's go for 70% for now. Tara, great to have you with us always. Let's go from London to La Paz, Bolivia. Let's bring in William Wroblewski, a video journalist at Agence France Presse, AFP, a former editor-in-chief and director of the Bolivian Express newspaper. Welcome to The World This Week, William.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to hearing, we all are, your detail on the ongoing crisis in Bolivia, a president under fire. But just talk us through your week. I imagine that must have occupied much of your time on the streets of La Paz.
Absolutely, it absolutely has. It's a very tense moment right now because what we have right now is an uprising of various social sectors, which includes members of the working class. It includes agricultural farmers that tend to be, Aymara indigenous, drivers. Different sectors have their own unique complaints against the government. I know in the past in Bolivia, say in the early 2000s, before the rise of Evo Morales, there was a lot of broader uniting of some of these movements towards a common goal, which is sort of to solidify now a little bit, but really it's sort of a perfect storm of different sectors facing an economic crisis that's been facing Bolivia for the past few years. And it's sort of coming to a head in these weeks. We've been under intense protest for about a month now. And it's sort of culminated into these sectors asking or demanding the resignation of President Rodrigo Paz, who campaigned as a right-wing centrist and was elected 6 months ago. And what Bolivia is finding is that his policy is moving more and more to the right, and more to some of these private interests. Whereas, for example, under the government of Evo Morales, a lot of these sectors, these workers, these indigenous groups, had direct access to power. They were part of the conversation of where the country was going. But after 2 decades, that sort of got cut off. And so they're obviously quite upset.
We'll look at it in detail coming up in the programme, and what's been happening on the streets and where this goes next as well. Great to have you on board tonight, William. Let's complete the lineup. Let's travel 5,500 miles east from Bolivia to Spain, back to Europe. Let's go to Madrid. Let's bring in the France 24 Spain correspondent, Sarah Morris. Evening to you, Sarah.
Evening, Gavin.
Great to have you on the programme. Previously, Madrid correspondent for Reuters, regular contributor to Spain's public broadcast company RTVE. In 2022, the International Press Club of Spain named Sarah the best foreign correspondent in the country for her rigour and objectivity in reporting. I want to touch on the Peter Murrell story with you, Sarah, because we're going to be discussing corruption and embezzlement alleged in Spain, but it is rare that we see, as proven in Scotland this week, the detail, the level of minutiae of the physical shopping list of items that were embezzled, stolen in the case of Peter Murrell. Sarah, let me talk you through some of these stolen acquisitions. We have things like a black and white tea set and vanity bureau, £3,000, 3,192 in fact, for a salt and pepper shaker. The list goes on. Pressure washers, a cordless vacuum. There was a Royal Mint Scottish Silver unicorn coin. There's the salt and pepper shakers. £795 for the unicorn coin. Luxury umbrellas, multiple video consoles and expensive coffee machines. Jenny's laughing. A Jaguar I mentioned before. This curry sauce, it goes to the other end, £11.99. A bottle of £3.50 super glue and Neutrogena hand cream for £2.50. So as I say, we'll look at the Spanish scandal allegations coming up. But what have you made of this? The level of detail. Is it making the press in Spain?
It isn't making the press much in Spain, but it's certainly caught my eye that list runs for 119 pages. Yeah. And as you say, from the very mundane to the absolute extravagance of a Jaguar and that caravan that was luxurious. That really, it's the objects which stand out. What struck me was that in Spain, where there is a slew of allegations against many people close to the Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, a similar image has popped out and the Spanish media have latched onto it, and that is the image of sparkling jewels seized from the former Prime Minister José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero's office in a raid last week. And basically those images which should show sparkling diamond-looking jewels, potentially sapphires, they have grabbed people's attention. Zapatero's spokesman has said that they are worth between 30,000 to 40,000 euros, but there's been a lot of speculation as to whether they're worth a lot more. And whatever happens to Zapatero in the future, whether he eventually does end up in court for these allegations, one suspects that these images will stay in the Spanish imagination, just like that luxury caravan for years to come.
The other thing that might stay in the imagination, I forgot to mention, is the quote, slouch pouch onesie. Have a guess how much that cost?
Oh, hundreds.
£75.55. Sadly, Sarah, it's not yet been recovered, according to reports. But it's great to have you with us, Sarah, tonight. Let's begin. 2:30 in the afternoon, Tuesday, in Tehran. The first signs emerged that the Iranian regime had begun to partially lift its internet blackout. The monitoring group NetBlocks reporting that after 90 days of near zero connectivity, Iranians had around 35% of the access that they had before the nationwide protests in January. Social media messaging apps remain heavily restricted or blocked. And the reason for the slight online easing President Trump claimed in his cabinet office meeting on Thursday is because the regime is desperate to keep its collapsing economy afloat. This was not due to humanitarian concerns, he said. And as we speak, there is a situation room meeting ongoing where the talk is that there could be an imminent deal on a ceasefire extension. Tara, first of all, what are you making of where we're at? Deal delayed, a possible deal on extension of where things stand right now?
Where do I even start, Gavin? I do want to go back to the people, if I may, just quickly, because you mentioned the internet blockade and this essentially electronic prison that the Iranian people were in for more than 90 days. Again, let's remind our viewers that in the start of the year, back in January, those deadly protests claimed the lives of thousands of Iranian people and also led to the arrest of thousands more. And it was then that the government shut down the internet, okay? And then about 2-3 weeks as those protests went on, the internet slowly connected, but not in its entirety. And then February 28th, the war happened and the internet once again fully shut down, okay? So we need to remember that for the most part of 2026, 90 million ordinary Iranians, some of the most educated, digitally plugged in populations in that entire region have been under the longest internet blackout in history, and we should not forget that. And I was speaking with someone in Iran who I have actually worked with on my first book, and he said, Tara, the sentiment that we have is as if we were prisoners for the longest time, and now we're suddenly being set free. And another person I spoke with who, again, for 3 months did not manage to speak with his elderly mother in Iran. He's actually in New York. He said, Tara, for me, the sentiment was, and this is a sentiment I've heard from others, very similar. He said, we are as if our beloved is in the ICU and we're just watching from the outside with no access or no way to get in touch with that person. So we should not at all underplay the impact, the psychological, the financial impact of this internet blackout on the people of Iran. But I know your question was about the state of the deal. Indeed, 3 days ago, the Iranians leaked a potential MOU to be signed. Donald Trump denied that. But as we're speaking, the president of the United States said that we are close to making a deal. In his Truth Social post, he said, we are going to immediately lift the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran will therefore allow free passage of ships, something, Gavin, that Iranians have continuously been saying that we are allowing ships to go by, except that of adversaries. And that Trump continued on saying that Iranians should not charge toll, something that Iranians have been doing in cryptocurrency. And the most important thing that stood out to me in this Truth Social post that came out just a few hours ago today was how the president of the United States said that with the help of China, this is interesting, with the help of China, we are going to extract the remnants of the nuclear dust, if you so will, that's remaining nearly 400 kg enriched uranium that remains in Iran, and that Iran would no longer have a nuclear weapon. And that bit to me is interesting. Now, of course, no official statements from the Iranians, except Iran's Fars news agency, extremely closely aligned with the IRGC, said none of this is true, no deal has been reached, and we will do things on our own terms. So the bottom line is there's zero trust between both sides. There are spoilers both in Iran and the United States. And ultimately, we should not forget the role of Israel. Israel most certainly does not want an end to this conflict. And they, of course, can at any moment act unilaterally. So we have to wait and see whether or not this MOU that would extend the ceasefire for 60 days would really come to fruition. But at the moment, nothing is confirmed.
So while we're on air, as we're talking, in fact, there's breaking news from AFP saying that Tehran say, quote, there is no final deal with the United States. That's, as things stand right now, we don't know if the situation room meeting is finished. Yeah. Janine.
Yeah, I've just come back from 6 weeks in the U.S., which was interesting, mainly in Washington and New York City, and New Haven as well. And I think in this horrific war against the Iranian people, there is something that's come out of it, and that is Trump's demise. It was the first time I've really seen his kind of core questioning, what is this? People are calling it Israel's war. People are saying, why Are we involved in this? And it's all down to the cost of petrol. It's nearly $5 a gallon, and groceries are skyrocketing. Last weekend was Memorial Day, big American holiday. People couldn't go because the air prices of air travel have absolutely skyrocketed. So it's kind of turned on him and his MAGA cohorts. I think that's interesting. The other thing for me, I want to go back to the Gulf countries. His latest explosion on Oman.
Yes.
Oman, who is one of the more benign countries who have negotiated deals, done back-channel diplomacy in Syria, in Palestine, and now in Iran, and he suddenly has turned on them. So I think that...
So to say he's turned on them, just clarify what he said. So this was in a cabinet meeting. He was asked about Oman. He said, talk about the tolls and management of the Strait of Hormuz, which they're reportedly talking to Iran about setting up a joint management.
Yeah.
This would be called the Persian Gulf Hormuz Strait Authority. It's a very benign sounding name for a toll booth. And he said they must behave like anybody else, and if they don't, the US would have to blow them up.
So, I mean, this is, I think, the FT reported this is the 13th country that he has either blown up or threatened to blow up.
An ally.
An ally. And actually, as I said, one of the countries that is always involved in back-channel diplomacy, trying to bring peace to the region.
That has been bombed as well by Iran.
By Iran, yeah. So I think the fragility of the Gulf right now is really important to look at as well. And the UAE is vulnerable, but enforcing this Abraham Accords on them has really left most of the Gulf leaders completely baffled. I mean, the Saudis might go along with it, but I can't see, and the Emiratis, but the others, I think it's leaving people in a very vulnerable position. So again, back to, is this Israel's war?
To that point, Tora, just let's talk about the other point that Janine just made here, because this is according to Barak Ravid at the news site Axios this week, that President Trump had a group call with several regional leaders, Saudi Arabia, as Janine mentioned, Qatar, the UAE, Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, Pakistan. He reportedly told Turkey and Saudi Arabia they have to sign the Abraham Accords, this is with Israel, to normalise diplomatic relations, to which there was silence from the 7 leaders on the line, reportedly. No one spoke, and he said, "Are you still there?"
Exactly. I was actually in Saudi Arabia right before the war started, and I raised the issue of the Abrahamic Accord with some sources, diplomatic sources there, and they told me that most likely Saudi will not join, and most likely because they can't sell it to their domestic base. But of course, all of this is speculation. What I will say, Gavin, is a day will come when this war and conflict will end, however it will, and we will have a reblocking and rearrangement, a new rearrangement in the Middle East. The Gulf countries do not have the same threshold to absorb a pain that Iran does. Let's not forget that Iran went through an 8-year war with Iraq at a time that Iraq had the support of the US and Europeans, all the while Iran was coming out of a revolution, and it continued doing so. So the threshold for pain for the Islamic regime of Iran is quite high, whilst, by the way, to the detriment of the Iranian people. But that's a separate story. What I also would say that emerged, especially in the past month, is the diversion between the UAE and other Gulf countries, particularly Saudi Arabia. And again, let's not forget that Saudi and the UAE, again, before this war got started, while I was in Saudi, were having a huge spat over Yemen. And then, of course, suddenly this war started, and the attention was diverted. But for the first time, it's important to remind our viewers that for the first time in history, Israel allowed the UAE to use its Iron Dome technology with Israeli forces on the ground in UAE to protect them. I mean, this is incredible. So we are seeing a situation where the UAE is looking outward to Israel for protection and engagement, all the while the rest of the Gulf are looking elsewhere. And I think the danger here, or at least something that we should look out for, is how potentially China specifically is going to fill that void in long term. Also, another point that the Iranians have been making over and over and over again is that the single most threat to these Gulf countries in this war has been the presence of U.S. bases and U.S. forces in the Gulf countries. And their argument, again, as of this, 3 days ago, when they were presenting their version of the MOU, according to Iranian state media, is that U.S. must withdraw its forces from the region. So the bottom line is a day will come after this war that we will see new security arrangements and a new reblocking of the region, mainly with the Gulf.
And that is an important nuance, because that's been dropped in repeatedly, almost like fishing bait. And none of the Gulf countries, aside from the UAE, have strongly come out to say that can't happen. And I guess the question fundamentally is about how much protection the US provides, given that these drones are still hitting bases or fragmenting and still presenting a threat. So that will still play out. Just a very brief point on ordinary. You talked right at the start, Tara, about the communications starting to improve slightly. Now, there's two thoughts on this. To those watching, to try to understand what level of blackout there is. If you switch on a mobile or computer in Iran, there's an intranet, isn't there? So almost there's the guise that there's some, before this, during the conflict, there's some kind of online stream. So you can go on the equivalent of, say, I don't know, Uber in Iran, or for food, or for their equivalent of Netflix. But it's all contained, it's all within. Is that right?
Yes, and if I can encapsulate this in a simple form, there's an intranet, so there's a domestic internet, right, that people can have access to in such times. But even that has not been functioning during this internet blackout. So just again, imagine a total, complete blackout. And even in the earlier days of the war, and mind you, by the way, during those deadly January protests, mobile cellular lines were also not working. They were disconnected, and people were fearing surveillance through landline. At the same time, it's worth our viewers remembering that Iran highly restricts websites and filters and censors the World Wide Web. So if you and I tomorrow go to Tehran with this sort of limited opening of the internet, of the international internet, if we want to get to on certain websites, we need to have VPNs. We need to go around and circumvent certain censorships and filtering in an effort to go to that website. That's true for X, for Instagram, for various social media platforms. So altogether, it's not an easy task, let alone behind an internet blackout.
So if you're on the ordinary internet right now, if it's up to 35%, you can't get on social media. Could people watch The World This Week? Could they watch France 24?
Maybe if they have VPNs. Yes.
A quick thought, yes. Janine, to Tara's point.
And by the way, sorry, I apologize, but the VPNs are expensive, Gavin. We must not forget that these VPNs are extremely expensive, and inflation in Iran is passing 70%, where over 45 million people are living below the poverty line. So many see access to internet as a fundamental human right. Apologies.
No, not at all. Janine, to that point, you also talked about the last few weeks in the US. There was some reporting this week that sitting in the cabinet meeting room, President Trump appeared, this is according to the Telegraph Washington chief correspondent, bored, that he wanted to move on, that he kind of limited his time, wanted to talk about Cuba and other things. And yet he says he doesn't care about the midterms. He also said that this week. Yeah. Doesn't mean anything to him. How much pressure do you think he's under within his own party?
I think he's under tremendous pressure. I think that there's a revision within the Republican Party that, people are looking, mainly because of Iran and Gaza and Lebanon, looking at these wars and also comparing them to Afghanistan and Iraq. And Iran is a very different conflict, because what he found, he couldn't just march into Tehran and put a flag down and say, this is ours. Also, remember, there's going to be reparations. Who is going to pay to rebuild Iran? It'll be the U.S. I mean, I think the Chinese have said something about it, but I think it'll largely have to be the U.S. So, I mean, he's unpopular for this. The midterms are very close. I mean, they're November, but that's going to go by very quickly. And in the meantime, he is extremely unpopular. And it's really the first time I was in the U.S. all of the autumn teaching at Yale. And then I was really worried about the midterms, and now I feel that he's losing ground. And can I just say one thing and tie it into Israel? 2 points. I think that there is a sea change in the U.S. on Israel as well. It is the first time I've noticed it that even Republican policymakers, lawmakers are saying, what are we doing in this war? And I think it was Lebanon that tipped it. People watched Gaza be obliterated, 70,000 plus people killed, most of them women and children. And they didn't react as much. And now seeing what the destruction of the Middle East has turned something. And I think Israel realizes that. They're now up against the Pope, basically. And France, this week, shockingly, I never thought I'd see the day. Ben Gvir will not be allowed into France. That's followed by Poland. Sikorsky has basically used very strong language that no democratic country should be acting like this, because of the flotilla.
Exactly. This is a 5-year ban imposed by Poland, imposed by the UN because of this facility, the treatment and the taunting by Ben Gvir and the allegations against the Israeli government.
But Europe is lining up.
Yes.
France, Spain, back to Sanchez.
And there are many allegations, including of abuse. I should say the Israeli prison service deny them, and that continues those investigations. Janine, to this point, it allows us to move across to the other side of the world, to Bolivia, a president who has declared his country is at breaking point. This is President Rodrigo Paz. Born in Spain to parents in exile, his own father was a left-wing leader who'd fled Bolivia's regime in the 1980s. He was previously a local politician and mayor, and Rodrigo Paz upended Bolivian politics. Last November, he won the presidential race, and with it ended 2 decades of state-led socialism and left-wing populism amidst a national mode of exhaustion and status quo dominated by Evo Morales and his mass movement after he'd gone. This is what Rodrigo Paz pledged when he won at the end of last year.
Starting November 8th, Bolivia will no longer face fuel shortages. With the support of partner nations we've engaged, every step we've taken has been in service of the Bolivian people. Our goal is to establish a stable government and begin the transformative changes that lie ahead.
The poor state of the economy was one of the core reasons he won, but 6 months on, the so-called stability candidate hasn't so far brought stability. There are fuel shortages, a weakened currency, inflation rising, imported basics more expensive. The president's been attempting what analysts see as moderate austerity, measures that are biting half the farmers, transport workers, lower income households. There have been street protests since the start of the month. There have been severe blockades, roadblocks for 2 weeks. Fuel trucks basically cannot reach the big cities. Time is running out, is what President Paz said this Wednesday.
These 25 days of strikes are costing us close to $600 million, especially for the cities of La Paz and El Alto. What they are doing now is worse than the situation during COVID. This is a very hard blow.
William, you've been in Bolivia for decades. Has it become more unlivable for people now, more than before? And who or what is to blame?
It absolutely has. It absolutely has. Today, day to day, average Bolivians are facing fuel shortages, and when they can't access that fuel, it means waiting in line at a gas station for hours or even days. Also remember that earlier this year, one of the first major moves that Rodrigo Paz did in the country was to lift decades-old fuel subsidies. And so overnight, the price of diesel, the price of gasoline doubled or tripled overnight, which obviously affects various sectors. And today, part of this blame can go to the economic situation in Bolivia, that the struggle we've been facing here for the past several years in terms of inflation, prices of goods, meat, milk, basic goods are going up, but also it is being exacerbated by these road blockades that are growing every day. Earlier this week, across the nation, there was maybe, I think, 45 or 50 blockades, and at last count, there was over 70. And so they're sort of being reinforced across the country, causing problems. As you can see right now, the footage that you're showing, I shot that this week at the airport in the cargo sector of the airport here in El Alto, which is the indigenous city above La Paz. What's happening is the restaurants and grocery stores are running out of meat, they're running out of chicken. And so families are having family members send on cargo flights chicken from other cities, from Cochabamba, from Santa Cruz. Families are packing coolers and putting them on planes and sending them here to the airport in El Alto. And I spent a couple of short hours there with the folks going there there's a woman there picking up her chicken out of coolers. And everyone I talked to there continued to talk about the problems that they're having, that everything is way too expensive. Their income isn't paying for basic goods. They can't feed their families. There's no medicine in hospitals. There's no oxygen in hospitals, things like that. But the interesting thing is when I asked them about the cause or what's to blame, perhaps logic might say these roadblocks are preventing goods from hitting the cities, which is true. But most of the people I talked to, the first person they look to is Rodrigo Paz and his government, saying that the government is not looking out for them. The government is not finding solutions. The government is not addressing the economic problems, and they're not negotiating with the protesters in a way that can allow this country to move forward.
And the grievances against President Paz, I mean, one question could be, what other options did he have if the roadblocks are in place and is it justifiable to say that he's been prevented from bringing his pledges to fruition? And then there's the other point of that, which is, to the question aside, where is this heading, William? There's talk of a state emergency now being declared.
Yes, there was a law passed under another brief conservative government in 2020 that gave limitations to the president to call a state of emergency. Earlier this week, the Bolivian Senate, then the legislature, voted to annul that law signed by Rodrigo Paz on Wednesday. I believe it was on Wednesday when he signed it, which basically lifted a lot of these restrictions about bringing out the military to control protests, to clear blockades, and those sorts of things, which is quite extreme here in Bolivia in the sense that it brings back memories of military in the street that we saw, I had mentioned earlier, in the early 2000s, which led to eventually to the fall of the president Goni at the time, another right-wing president. But he was, from the point of view of the protesters, I think they think he's been given time. He's been president for 6 months, which is a short amount of time. It's not a full not a full presidency. However, he campaigned on an inclusive government. He campaigned on, as you mentioned, getting rid of fuel shortages, fixing these problems. And also remember that his support came largely from these people that are now protesting and asking for his resignation.
Yes. Well, William.
So they're. Mm-hmm.
No, it's at a junction now. I think it's clearly uncertain, and I would like you to come back on the programme as well at some point in the coming weeks, because this is clearly to be continued. William, for now, let's move from Bolivia. Let's go to Spain, because another leader on thinner ground politically right now is the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez. 9 o'clock Wednesday morning, the Vatican, he had an audience with the Pope. 45 minutes with Leo XIV about war in the Middle East and Ukraine, immigration, AI and ethics. At the same time, the ethics of his governing party were being investigated back home in his hometown, Madrid. Law enforcement officers knocking at the door of the Socialist Party headquarters. Spanish TV rolling news went into split-screen mode, showing the contrasting events at the same time, the search lasting 12 hours, connected to an alleged secret operation run within the HQ to intimidate, discredit journalists, judges, prosecutors, police who are investigating alleged corruption cases in the party, as well as influence peddling allegations against the wife of Pedro Sánchez, Begoña Gómez, and his own brother too, David Sánchez. Now, these documents seized related to irregular payments made to an official called Maria Leary Diaz. Payments, it's claimed, that are for her work as a so-called fontanera, a plumber whose job was to do the dirty work for parties unofficially to gather compromat information to neutralise a threat to the government. She denies wrongdoing. She says she was researching a book. The Conservative Party are demanding elections. Pedro Sánchez frames this as lawfare. Sarah, these are many intertwined cases here that's being investigated. All adds to the pressure of Pedro Sanchez to resign. Tell us about this week and the most pressing cases and whether this could topple him.
There are so many cases, Gavin, that judges in some ways are having to chop them up to deal with them. One of the Basque nationalist spokespeople, he calculated that there were 9 cases. I suspect that there may even be more than that. Some of the figures are involved in multiple cases. Perhaps the most damaging one is the one against the former Prime Minister José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero. You might think he's ancient history because he was a Prime Minister between 2004 and 2011, but he has been a big supporter of the current Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez. He has gone out in the 2023 elections and campaigned with him. He's also been a broker between him and those left-wing allies like Suma and Podemos, the votes of whom Pedro Sanchez. He is an active of the Pedro Sanchez government, and the allegations against him that emerged are that he was running an international network, that he may have taken as high as €2 million in payments for putting together contracts from including Venezuelan businesses and notably a €53 million bailout. It's been particularly damaging, and although initially some of the allies of Pedro Sanchez in the parliament said that it was lawfare, said that it was politically motivated, as they have seen some of the court documents, they've actually started to ask for an early election. And so that shows you really how sticky things are getting for Pedro Sanchez.
And that case with former Prime Minister José Zapatero is coming up very soon, accused of being the apex or leader of an influence peddling operation, acquiring €53 million government bailout for the Spanish airline business Plus Ultra, and doing so feathering his own nest to the tune of €1.5 million funneled to him, $500,000 to his daughter's business. He denies wrongdoing. Thank you so much to Sarah, to the panel tonight as well, taking us through ever fast-moving world of global politics with insight, on-the-ground experience that no AI can ever replicate. Thank you, Janine De Giovanni, celebrated war correspondent, CEO of The Reckoning Project, and award-winning author of 9 books, including The Morning They Came For Us, Dispatches from Syria. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too.
In London, thank you, Tara Kangalu, renowned voice on Iran, founder of the Art of Hope charity, journalist and author of The Heartbeat of Iran, Real Voices of a Country and Its People. Thank you to you, Tara.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. As always, La Paz, Bolivia. Thank you, William Roblewski, writer, journalist and producer. Have a great weekend, William. Que tengas un buen fin de.
Thank you so much. You as well.
And in Madrid, Sarah Morris. Thank you, the France 24 Spain correspondent. Gracias, Sarah.
De nada, buen fin de.
Thank you for watching. I'll leave you this week with the most copied viral video moment of the week and possibly the year so far from Netflix's breakout movie of 2026. Survival thriller. It's called Apex. Not for the faint-hearted. Hundreds of thousands of people have been squawking while dancing like a psycho to the Chemical Brothers. Here's a clip. It's very simple. You have till the end of this trailer to get the kettle on, get ready for the weekend, and in 7 days, get ready for the world next week. Go.
So look, it's very simple. You've got until the very end of this song to get as far away from me as you can, okay? Okay? What's the matter? I thought you liked danger.
Everything getting harder to find. Everybody jumping out of their mind. Everybody going out of their skin. See, we get to the end, but that's where we begin. You feel it? Mannequins and we breaking the moves. Breaking out and we breaking the codes. Similar to the jack who stole to the depths in your web, so you take explosive, get it out. Send your body to flight. Everybody got a target tonight.
Three countries, 48 teams, 104 matches. One world watching. From Mexico to Canada to the United States. No borders, no limits. This is global. This is history in motion. One mission, one dream to make history. Football goes into orbit. From June 11th to July 19th. Experience it here on Earth on France 24.